In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Heath Ledger was the undeniable golden boy of an entire generation. He possessed a radiant, effortless charisma that the Hollywood machine desperately craves and fiercely protects. From the rebellious, magnetic heartthrob with the infectious smile to a fiercely dedicated, fiercely independent artist, he was universally adored. He seemingly had the entire world in the palm of his hand. But I want you to look at the final photographs captured by the paparazzi just days before January 22, 2008. Look closely at his face. Notice the hollow, deeply sunken eyes. Look at the frantic, exhausted posture of a man wandering the freezing streets of New York City. You are looking at a physical shell so thoroughly devastated, so completely drained of life energy, that it sends a visceral, uncomfortable chill down your spine. When his tragic death was announced to the world, the global media and the Hollywood public relations machine immediately fed us a cheap, highly lucrative lie. They constructed a dark, deeply romanticized mythology, telling the public that the character of the Joker literally killed him. They sold the world a theatrical ghost story, claiming he stared so deeply into the abyss of a psychopath that the abyss finally reached out and swallowed him whole. It is a flawless, perfectly executed fable designed specifically to cover up a profound psychological crime. But the truth hiding behind that manufactured legend is far more terrifying than any comic book villain. He was not consumed by a fictional monster. He was systematically, brutally crushed by a very real, very human nightmare. Today we look past the cinematic makeup and the media mythology to expose the crushing weight of untreated clinical insomnia, the absolute, suffocating isolation of fame, and an industrial complex that watches its brightest stars suffocate, yet only demands another take. Welcome to Post-Credit. To truly understand how a brilliant man is destroyed by a corporate system, you must first understand how he desperately, violently tried to escape it. When Heath Ledger arrived in Los Angeles from Perth, Australia, the entertainment industry immediately recognized him as an incredibly valuable financial asset. He had the chiseled jawline, the piercing eyes, and the rugged, masculine charm that studio executives could easily package, market, and sell to millions of teenagers across the globe. After the massive, explosive success of the teen comedy 10 Things I Hate About You, Hollywood tried to put a permanent barcode on his forehead. They offered him multi-million-dollar contracts to play the exact same handsome, shallow protagonist for the rest of his natural life. They wanted him to be nothing more than a poster on a bedroom wall. They wanted him docile, predictable, and above all else, consistently profitable. But Heath possessed a fierce, restless intellect and a deep reverence for the craft of acting. He completely despised the concept of being a manufactured plastic idol. He recognized the golden cage being meticulously built around him, and he violently rejected it. He began a systematic, highly intentional campaign of career sabotage. He actively sought out supporting roles that would completely destroy his pretty boy image. He chose to play deeply flawed, traumatized, and broken men in heavy, depressing films like Monsters Ball. His ultimate act of artistic rebellion came when he took massive financial and social risks to play Ennis Del Mar, a repressed, agonizingly lonely cowboy in Brokeback Mountain. For this role, he did not just memorize lines from a script. He physically altered the biological structure of his vocal cords, dropping his voice into a harsh, gravelly whisper that damaged his throat. He clenched his jaw so tightly during the entire production that it permanently affected his posture and caused severe physical pain. He was desperately trying to prove to the world, and more importantly to himself, that he was a legitimate artist, not a disposable studio product. But in Hollywood, rebellion comes with a terrifyingly heavy price. The more he proved his immense, undeniable talent, the more the industry demanded from his soul. The machine does not let its greatest assets simply walk away into the shadows. It absorbs their rebellion, rebrands it as artistic genius, and continues to exploit their emotional labor on a much grander, much more invasive scale. The peak of global fame is rarely a beautiful mountaintop. It is usually a very small, incredibly lonely island, entirely surrounded by hungry predators. As Heath's critical acclaim skyrocketed, his personal life became a highly lucrative hunting ground for the international paparazzi. Following the birth of his daughter, the media scrutiny reached an unbearable, feverish pitch. He was no longer just an actor doing a job. His family, his private moments, and his emotional reactions were now commodities traded on the open market. The press, particularly the tabloid magazines in his home country of Australia, was notoriously, viciously aggressive. They stalked his private residence. They blinded him with relentless flashbulbs every single time he stepped outside to buy groceries or get a cup of coffee. They actively provoked him, and then they openly mocked his anger when he desperately tried to shield his infant daughter's face from the cameras. This relentless, 24-hour surveillance fundamentally altered the wiring of his nervous system. In the field of trauma psychology, there is a condition known as hyper-vigilance. Imagine the devastating psychological toll of never knowing if you are being watched, judged, or recorded. Imagine a constant, suffocating state of neurological panic, where the simple act of walking down the street triggers a massive fight-or-flight response in your brain, flooding your veins with cortisol and adrenaline. The fundamental sanctuary of his home, the one place a human being is supposed to feel safe, was permanently breached. When his relationship tragically dissolved, the emotional devastation was absolute. Heath relocated to New York City. He was seeking anonymity, hoping to disappear into the massive, indifferent, fast-moving crowds of Manhattan. Instead, he found himself entirely alone in a sprawling, empty apartment. He was completely isolated from his family, carrying the crushing, unbearable emotional weight of a broken home and a fractured heart. He was an intensely empathetic, deeply sensitive man, now living in a profound emotional vacuum. And it was exactly in this state of total psychological vulnerability, stripped of his emotional anchors and physically exhausted by the flashbulbs, that he accepted the most dangerous, demanding assignment of his entire life. When legendary director Christopher Nolan cast Heath Ledger as the Joker in The Dark Knight, the internet exploded with cynical, mocking backlash. The public could not comprehend how the handsome cowboy from a teen romance could possibly play the ultimate, terrifying agent of chaos. Heath knew he had to silence the world, so he locked himself inside a London hotel room for roughly a month to construct the complex, terrifying psychology of a madman. He kept a meticulous, deeply disturbing diary. He experimented with terrifying, unnatural voices. He read heavy, dark literature and studied the movements of predatory animals. This is a common, highly effective, and widely respected technique in the realm of method acting. But immediately after his death, the mainstream media retroactively weaponized this period of intense preparation. They took the image of a highly dedicated, disciplined actor simply doing his job, and they spun it into a sensationalist, supernatural narrative of demonic possession. The press began publishing endless articles claiming the role literally drove him insane. They reported that his New York apartment was a terrifying shrine to the Joker. They painted a vivid picture of a man who lost his mind because the character was simply too dark, too evil for a human soul to handle. Why did the media and the studio executives allow this false, highly exaggerated narrative to flourish without correcting it? Because a cursed movie sells an unbelievable amount of tickets. It is perhaps the most morbid, brilliant, and deeply unethical marketing campaign in the entire history of cinema. The global public flocked to the theaters, not just to see an action-packed superhero movie, but to watch a modern snuff film. They wanted to sit in the dark and see the exact frames of celluloid that supposedly killed a human being. We romanticized his agonizing pain. We consumed his supposed madness as a form of high-end entertainment, completely ignoring the terrifying biological reality that was actually shutting down his vital organs. We have finally arrived at the darkest, most carefully hidden corner of the room. The absolute truth that the industry desperately swept under the rug to protect its own image. The Joker did not kill Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger was murdered by severe, chronic, agonizing insomnia and a corporate production system that completely ignored a dying man because the cameras were still rolling and the budget was already locked. For years, long before he ever put on the clown makeup, Heath suffered from a severe, debilitating inability to sleep. His brilliant brain, constantly racing with intense creative energy, profound anxiety, and the immense crushing pressure of his career, simply refused to shut down. He famously stated in an interview that his physical body would be entirely exhausted, begging for rest, but his mind was still going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. He was surviving on roughly 2 hours of broken sleep a night. In clinical neurology, chronic, long-term sleep deprivation is not just a mild inconvenience or a sign of working hard. It is a literal, recognized form of physical torture. When the human brain is denied rapid eye movement sleep for prolonged periods, the nervous system begins to systematically, violently collapse. The amygdala, the fear and emotion center of the brain, becomes incredibly hyperactive. You experience terrifying micro-sleeps, extreme paranoia, uncontrollable physical tremors, and a total catastrophic breakdown of the immune system. His body was physically rotting from the inside out due to sheer, unrelenting, torturous exhaustion. Immediately after wrapping The Dark Knight, instead of being sent to a hospital, a rehabilitation center, or a specialized sleep clinic to recover his shattered biology, Heath was flown straight to the freezing, rain-soaked set of the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus in London. His immune system was completely gone. He contracted severe, crippling pneumonia. His lungs were slowly filling with fluid. He was shivering violently, coughing relentlessly, and physically crumbling right in front of the director and the entire crew. Did the massive multi-million-dollar production halt to save the life of their leading man? No. The shooting schedule was firmly set. The financial budget was locked. The insurance companies were watching. The show, no matter the human cost, must go on. To survive the grueling, freezing shooting schedule, to silence his violently racing mind, and to simply breathe through the agonizing pain of pneumonia, Heath became entirely reliant on a heavy cocktail of prescription medications. He was not a reckless, out-of-control drug addict looking for a cheap high at a Hollywood party. He was a desperate, profoundly exhausted, physically sick father begging his own brain for just a few hours of absolute silence. On the cold night he died, he ingested a fatal combination of oxycodone, hydrocodone, diazepam, and sleeping pills. It was a tragic, accidental cocktail born out of pure desperation, not a deliberate suicide. The severe respiratory depression caused by the heavy medications, combined with his pneumonia-ravaged lungs, simply stopped his exhausted heart from beating. He did not die because he thought he was a psychopathic clown. He died because his physical body was a broken, exhausted, heavily exploited machine that was driven hundreds of miles past empty. The Hollywood system watched a man dying of pneumonia and severe sleep deprivation, and instead of calling an ambulance or shutting down the set, they adjusted the stage lighting, fixed his makeup, and yelled action. The global entertainment industry operates on a terrifying, highly hypocritical paradox. It demands absolute emotional vulnerability and extreme physical sacrifice from its greatest artists, but it assumes absolutely zero responsibility when that exact sacrifice physically breaks them into pieces. The posthumous Academy Award handed to Heath's grieving family a year later was not just a beautiful celebration of a brilliant, generation-defining performance. It was a calculated act of corporate absolution. By giving him the highest, most prestigious honor in the industry, Hollywood effectively washed the guilt and the blood from its own hands. They gave a dead man a standing ovation, sending a terrifying, silent message to every other young actor sitting in that glittering room. Thank you for completely destroying yourself to create our masterpiece. We will reward your death with gold. We must also confront our own dark complicity as an audience. We constantly demand authentic, bleeding, raw performances. We want to see real, visceral pain on the screen to entertain us on a Friday night. But when the screen fades to black, we willfully ignore the shattered, empty human beings left in the wake of our entertainment. We prefer the exciting, romantic myth of the tortured artistic genius over the depressing, ugly reality of a man dying from sheer physical exhaustion in a lonely apartment. Heath Ledger's death is the ultimate, undeniable indictment of a culture that values the final product far more than the actual person who suffered to create it. He gave absolutely everything he had to escape the golden, suffocating cage of a teenage pop idol, only to be locked inside an entirely different cage built by media sensationalism and corporate greed. When we look at the chaotic, brilliant, terrifying smile of the Joker on our screens today, what are we really looking at? Are we looking at a masterful, calculated illusion, carefully constructed by a highly dedicated actor? Or are we looking at the final, desperate artistic breath of a man who was quietly drowning in plain sight, begging for a rest that never came? If a multi-billion-dollar system pushes a man to the absolute physical breaking point, completely denies him rest, commodifies his exhaustion, and then romanticizes his tragic death to sell movie tickets and merchandise, is it a heartbreaking tragedy, or is it simply an industry standard? What do you think really happened in those final, agonizing months? Was he a victim of his own relentless artistic ambition, or a disposable casualty of a machine that absolutely refuses to stop? Unlock your thoughts in the comments section below. If this investigation made you question the reality you have been comfortably sold, hit the like button and subscribe to post-credit. We will continue to pull back the heavy curtain on the illusions they sell you long after the screen fades to black. goodbye and always question the memory of the masses.